Most men reveal their intellectual emptiness not through action, but through a single careless sentence. The words they speak betray the limits of their awareness more than any visible behavior ever could. You might have noticed it in conversations, in casual debates, even during arguments with people you thought were intelligent. That gnawing frustration, the unease that arises when logic collapses under shallow reasoning, it's not your imagination. It's a subtle reflection of the patterns they cannot see. Philosophers from Stoic schools to Jungian analysts have long observed that language is the truest mirror of the psyche. When someone's words reveal rigidity, ignorance, or insecurity, it exposes a consciousness trapped in illusion, unaware of its own shadow. In the next few minutes, you will learn 7 phrases that instantly expose shallow thinking in men, and more importantly, you'll gain the ability to perceive the hidden motives behind every casual statement, transforming the way you understand human behavior forever. Language is far more than a tool for communication. It is a living architecture, a subtle matrix in which consciousness manifests, revealing the structure of the mind even when the speaker believes they are speaking without thought. Every phrase carries weight, not just in the world of ideas, but in the invisible realm of intention, awareness, and perception. Words are fingerprints of the psyche, and when examined closely, they expose patterns that remain hidden to most people, including the speakers themselves. A careless remark, a passing sentence, or even a habitual turn of phrase can betray what someone truly believes about themselves in reality, long before their actions do. The first truth to understand is that language is never neutral. It is infused with judgment, assumption, and the degree to which a mind has confronted its own shadow. When a man speaks in absolutes, when he dismisses nuance or complexity, he is revealing a mind unpracticed in observation, untrained in reflection. He may call himself rational, intelligent, or self-aware, yet his words betray a rigidity, a fear of uncertainty, and a resistance to growth. The Stoic sages understood this centuries ago. Clarity is born from observation, from stepping outside the immediate reaction and observing the thought as it emerges. To truly see a man's intellect, one must listen to the structure, the texture, and the intention of his speech. The Jungian perspective deepens this understanding. Jung emphasized that the shadow is never confined to action. It resides within thought, within language, and within those tiny, unconscious choices that shape our reality. Every unexamined word becomes a mirror of the hidden self, reflecting fears, insecurities, and unacknowledged desires. A phrase that seems trivial in context can reveal profound truths about the speaker's emotional architecture, the limits of their awareness, and the ways they avoid confronting reality. The man who claims, "It's always been this way," is often trapped in a cycle of resignation. He has surrendered to repetition, comfort, and avoidance, and language becomes the vehicle through which this surrender is expressed. Beyond exposing weakness, words reveal the dynamics of power, control, and vulnerability. The man who insists, "I don't care what others think," is not displaying freedom. He is signaling fear. He fears judgment, but he lacks the courage to face it, so he fabricates indifference. Similarly, phrases meant to silence reflection, such as "you're overthinking it," are defensive structures, verbal shields erected to keep complexity at bay. Here lies an important paradox. The words of shallow thinking are often the loudest and most assertive, yet they mask the smallest understanding of depth. They are, in a sense, screams from the mind's prison, echoes of the limits it refuses to transcend. As you begin to perceive these subtle patterns, you may also notice a profound interconnectedness between language, thought, and reality itself. Words are not merely descriptive, they are performative. They shape perception, they frame experience, and they condition the speaker as much as the listener. A man who habitually speaks from fear, rigidity, or avoidance is reinforcing those states within himself, often without conscious awareness. His words become rituals that solidify limitation, and the world he inhabits begins to reflect those same limits back to him. Conversely, words that are chosen with clarity, reflection, and self-awareness signal a mind trained to navigate the unseen currents of consciousness, a mind capable of shaping reality rather than being shaped by it. This is why language matters, not for its surface meaning, but for the invisible architecture it reveals. Listening to the words a man chooses is an act of perception that goes beyond logic. It is an initiation into the hidden structures of thought, an invitation to see patterns of ego, shadow, and insight that most people never notice. In the subtle inflections of speech, in the hesitations, the overcorrections, and the habitual absolutes, the mind leaves a trail, a roadmap of consciousness waiting to be decoded. Ultimately, understanding the hidden architecture of words is not about judgment. It is about awareness. It is about learning to see beyond superficial appearances, to perceive the invisible patterns that shape action, character, and destiny. When you listen with this awareness, language transforms from noise into revelation. Each phrase becomes a window into a deeper reality, a reality in which intellect, fear, ego, and shadow intersect in ways that define the trajectory of every life. And in learning to perceive this, you begin to cultivate a vision that few possess, a vision that sees not only what is spoken, but what is lived beneath the words. Language does more than convey information. It shapes perception, molds expectation, and even bends reality in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. Certain phrases, when spoken by men, seem harmless or ordinary at first, yet they carry layers of meaning that reveal the limits of thought, the fractures of ego, and the unseen architecture of consciousness itself. These are not merely words. They are signals, markers of unseen patterns, indicators of minds either shackled by fear or inflated by delusion. What appears trivial often hides profound truths about how someone perceives themselves, others, and the world. Consider the phrase, "That's not my problem." On the surface, it might appear indifferent, even practical, yet underneath lies a fear of accountability, a refusal to engage with complexity, and a subtle avoidance of responsibility. The man who utters these words may believe himself autonomous, free from obligation, yet in truth, he has surrendered his agency to avoidance. This simple phrase is a lens into the psyche, a lens that shows how fear and ego manipulate even the simplest acts of communication. It is a quiet surrender, spoken aloud without self-awareness, yet its implications ripple outward, shaping relationships, choices, and reality itself. Then there is, "I knew that already." Confidence, yes, but of a peculiar kind, defensive, rigid, and protective of fragile self-image. It signals a mind that fears uncertainty, that perceives the unknown as a threat rather than an opportunity. Knowledge in such cases is not a tool for exploration, it is armor. The refusal to learn or listen subtly transforms the speaker's world into a narrow corridor where curiosity cannot thrive. Yet paradoxically, in this phrase lies the potential for awakening. To recognize this pattern is to glimpse the delicate boundary between fear-driven assertion and courageous engagement with reality. Some phrases are less direct, more insidious. "You're overthinking it," meant often as a dismissal, this statement reveals a discomfort with depth. It signals an inability or unwillingness to tolerate complexity, to sit in the discomfort of ambiguity or subtlety. The speaker avoids reflection because it threatens their equilibrium. Yet, for the listener, this is a key insight. Depth in thought often unnerves those untrained in introspection. The discomfort they express is not directed at you, it is the echo of their own avoidance, projected outward in the form of language. That's just how people are. This is resignation masquerading as wisdom. It appears calm, grounded, and even philosophical. But listen closely, it is a surrender to limitation, an unwillingness to consider change, growth, or nuance. The man who speaks this has built invisible walls, accepting patterns of behavior as immutable, avoiding the challenge of transformation. Stoic philosophy teaches that impermanence is the natural order. Those who speak in absolutes reveal a mind resisting that truth. Each repetition of this phrase is an act of subtle entrapment, both of self and of the listener, shaping perception toward inertia rather than possibility. The boast, "I'm not like other men," is equally revealing. At first glance, it seems proud, assertive, and confident, yet beneath the surface lies insecurity. Authentic individuality does not need to declare itself. It emerges through action, thought, and reflection. Words alone cannot confer depth, and when they are used as armor or declaration, they expose the fragile structure of self-perception. This phrase is a signpost. The ego is working overtime to convince itself of uniqueness, even when true insight has yet to take root. Finally, consider, "It doesn't matter." This phrase, so commonly dismissed as casual or indifferent, is often a mask for avoidance. It shields the speaker from uncomfortable truths, from responsibility, from reflection. What appears liberating is frequently a subtle act of denial, an attempt to erase consequence rather than engage with it. Stoicism teaches that life's challenges and responsibilities are the instruments of growth. The man who habitually declares that nothing matters is revealing the opposite, an unwillingness to confront what truly matters, even to himself. The deeper lesson in all of this is that words are never innocent. They carry intention, fear, and unexamined assumptions. They expose patterns of thought, ego structures, and hidden desires with clarity that action alone rarely achieves. Listening to these phrases is an act of initiation. It is to perceive not only what is spoken, but what the mind is struggling to conceal. In understanding these patterns, the observer gains insight into invisible dynamics, into the subtle interplay of fear, pride, and avoidance that governs not only speech, but the trajectory of life itself. What makes these sayings so transformative is that they reveal not only limitation, but possibility. They show us the hidden architecture of consciousness, the spaces where rigidity can become flexibility, where avoidance can become courage, and where fear can be transmuted into awareness. By attending to these phrases, you are not simply identifying shallow thinking, you are mapping the invisible terrain of the mind, observing its shadows, and glimpsing the potential for evolution within every act of speech. In this awareness lies a paradox. The very phrases that expose stupidity also illuminate the path toward wisdom. Listening closely, discerning patterns, and observing without judgment allows one to navigate not only the world of others, but the hidden corridors of one's own psyche. What seems mundane or trivial in speech becomes a key, a doorway into understanding, a mirror reflecting both limitation and potential, an invitation to see beyond the surface into the hidden mechanics of consciousness itself. The essence of understanding these phrases lies not merely in identifying shallow thinking, but in grasping the profound metaphysical truth they reveal about human consciousness. Words are the visible tip of an invisible iceberg. Beneath them lies the structure of the mind, shaped by fear, ego, desire, and shadow. The phrases we will explore, those casual, careless, or defensive statements, are not random. They are the footprints of inner patterns that have gone unnoticed for decades, sometimes a lifetime. When you learn to perceive these patterns, you are no longer simply observing others. You are witnessing the architecture of consciousness itself. Consider this. Each phrase that exposes limitation is simultaneously a revelation of potential. Stoicism teaches that obstacles are not barriers, but paths. And Jungian analysis shows that shadow, once perceived and integrated, becomes wisdom rather than a prison. Each phrase, each verbal slip, is a portal into understanding not only the other but also the self, because these patterns exist within all of us, waiting to be recognized. Here, we examine each of the 7 phrases individually, revealing both the limitation they expose and the deeper potential they illuminate. 1. That's impossible. At first, this phrase sounds like rational caution, a simple acknowledgement of limits. Yet beneath that surface lies fear, a mind unwilling to confront challenge, hesitant to explore beyond comfort zones. The person who declares impossibility has surrendered to perceived constraints, often unconsciously. In Stoicism, the obstacle is the path. Real growth arises when we confront difficulty, embracing resistance as a teacher. Similarly, Jungian thought shows that declaring impossibility is the shadow speaking, fear of inadequacy projected outward. Recognizing this phrase allows both observer and speaker to glimpse opportunity where others see limitation. 2. It's always like this. Absolute terms indicate rigidity and an unwillingness to perceive nuance. By saying, "It's always like this," the speaker reduces reality to a fixed narrative, rejecting complexity and change. From a Jungian perspective, absolutes are manifestations of a mind that fears uncertainty. Stoicism teaches that impermanence is natural. What appears constant is always shifting. When someone speaks in absolutes, it is a subtle admission of avoidance, a resistance to life's inherent unpredictability. This phrase becomes a mirror, revealing both external limitation and the opportunity for internal adaptability. 3. I don't care what others think. Superficially, this seems confident, independent, and untouchable. Yet beneath the surface, it often hides profound insecurity. The speaker attempts to control perception by projecting indifference. True Stoic courage is quiet, subtle, and self-aware. It does not demand validation through proclamation. Jungian insight shows this phrase as a shadow of ego, a defensive attempt to shield vulnerability while masking desire for acceptance. Observing it allows the listener to recognize both the external facade and the internal work required for genuine autonomy. Or, you're overthinking it. Often directed at reflective minds, this phrase signals discomfort with depth. The speaker is unsettled by introspection and complexity, preferring simplicity and avoidance. In Stoicism, thoughtful reflection is a tool for clarity and growth, not weakness. Jungian psychology interprets this as the shadow-resisting insight, a mind that cannot tolerate ambiguity. Recognizing this phrase illuminates the dynamics between shallow reaction and conscious engagement, teaching the observer patience, discernment, and the courage to embrace depth. 5. That's just how people are. Resignation masquerading as wisdom. This phrase reveals avoidance of responsibility and unwillingness to consider change in oneself or others. The shallow mind clings to perceived inevitability to avoid discomfort. Stoicism, however, emphasizes impermanence and transformation, the understanding that patterns exist to be understood, refined, or transcended. From a Jungian perspective, this statement exposes the shadow of inaction, the refusal to engage with possibility. Awareness of it allows both observation and self-reflection, revealing where complacency has replaced conscious choice. 6. I'm not like other men. A boast of uniqueness often masks insecurity. True individuality emerges not from words but from self-knowledge, reflection, and the integration of shadow. Stoicism teaches that character and integrity define identity, not declarations. Jungian analysis highlights this phrase as a projection, an attempt to assert superiority while concealing vulnerability. Observing this phrase allows the viewer to differentiate performative confidence from authentic selfhood, seeing both limitation and the hidden path toward true individuality. 7. It doesn't matter. This phrase seems liberating but often conceals avoidance. It shields the speaker from responsibility, uncomfortable emotions, or the consequences that foster maturity. Stoicism teaches that engagement with difficulty shapes character. Dismissing consequence signals a refusal to grow. Jungian insight reveals this phrase as shadow avoidance, the desire to escape depth, responsibility, and discomfort. Recognizing it allows the observer to cultivate discernment, presence, and subtle mastery over their own engagement with life. The core insight here is that intelligence, wisdom, and awareness are inseparable from self-reflection. Words cannot lie. They are the raw material of thought made manifest. The phrases above, when examined individually, reveal both limitation and potential. They are mirrors, windows, and keys, illuminating the shadows within others while pointing toward hidden dimensions of the self. By attending to these 7 phrases, by perceiving their subtle currents and invisible structures, you are decoding the grammar of consciousness itself. Awareness transforms perception. Once you perceive these hidden structures, you begin to navigate life differently. You see the currents beneath casual conversation, the patterns beneath routine behavior, and the invisible logic behind actions that others take for granted. Words become instruments of insight, portals of perception, and mirrors of the mind's hidden terrain. In understanding the architecture of speech, you begin to perceive the architecture of reality itself. Perhaps you have felt it before, the subtle tension that arises during a conversation with someone whose words leave you uneasy, irritated, or exhausted. It is not just the content of what they say, but the invisible weight behind it, the patterns of thought, fear, or avoidance that ripple beneath the surface. You may have left these interactions feeling drained, puzzled, or even quietly frustrated, as if something important had been spoken, yet you could not quite grasp its meaning. That tension, that quiet friction, is not your failure. It is a reflection of the subtle dynamics that govern human consciousness. You see, most people navigate the world largely unaware of the invisible currents that shape every exchange. Words are rarely neutral, and their meaning extends far beyond literal interpretation. The man who insists, "It's always like this," is not simply making an observation. He is revealing a rigidity in perception that you, as a reflective and aware individual, sense immediately. You notice the patterns because your mind is attuned to subtlety, to depth, to the unseen architecture of thought. This awareness can feel isolating, even painful at times, because it exposes the invisible limitations that others take for granted. Yet this is also a gift, the ability to perceive what remains hidden, to read between lines, to sense the shadow behind the spoken word. You may have noticed it in small ways: a dismissive phrase during a debate, a boast disguised as confidence, or a casual remark that belies fear. Perhaps you even catch yourself silently correcting, analyzing, or quietly judging, aware of truths that others are blind to. These experiences can make you feel misunderstood, even alone. But the truth is that your awareness is not a burden. It is an invitation. It is the first step toward mastery, toward perceiving the subtle mechanics of thought, intention, and reality that most never notice. And it is not only others' words that matter. The phrases we have examined exist within us as well. You may hear yourself uttering, "I don't care what others think," or "it doesn't matter," in moments of discomfort or fear. Perhaps you have declared, "That's impossible," when faced with a challenge that required courage or flexibility. These moments are not flaws, they are mirrors, reflections of patterns within your own mind. Observing them without judgment, acknowledging them without shame, is the key to self-mastery. It is through this reflection that wisdom grows, through this awareness that the mind begins to shift from reaction to insight, from limitation to possibility. You are not alone in this journey. Those who notice, who perceive, who reflect, are rare, and their awareness often brings with it a sense of solitude. But that solitude is not emptiness. It is the fertile ground in which insight takes root. Each conversation, each encounter, becomes an opportunity to witness the patterns of mind, to perceive shadow, and to practice the subtle art of observation. You begin to understand not only others but yourself, not only words but the forces that shape thought, emotion, and reality itself. In recognizing these patterns, you also cultivate patience, discernment, and presence. You no longer respond blindly to the phrases that seek to provoke or control. Instead, you witness with quiet clarity the architecture of consciousness laid bare before you. You notice the subtle rhythms of ego and fear, the repeated shadows in speech and behavior, and you begin to navigate human interaction with a depth that feels almost mystical. And the most profound part of this connection is this: your awareness is not passive. It is an active lens through which the world becomes intelligible, meaningful, and even enchanted. By observing the phrases that expose limitation, you also perceive possibility. You begin to see the invisible corridors of thought, the hidden currents of influence, the delicate interplay of fear, pride, and curiosity that govern action. Every interaction becomes a doorway into understanding, every phrase a key to perceiving the invisible forces that shape life itself. You feel seen in this truth because it resonates within your own experience. You have long sensed the subtle signals, the patterns of limitation and potential in those around you. Now, by seeing them more clearly, you can navigate them consciously. You are not reacting blindly to shallow thought or careless speech. You are observing, reflecting, and choosing how to engage. And in doing so, you honor your own depth, your own insight, and your own capacity to perceive and act with awareness. The journey is not simple. It requires patience, courage, and the willingness to see what others overlook. But in this practice, there is a profound liberation, the liberation of understanding, of clarity, and of the mystical alignment between awareness, words, and the hidden architecture of reality. You are no longer merely a passive participant in conversations or interactions. You are an observer, a navigator, and a witness to the subtle currents that define not only others, but yourself. Now, with this awareness, a choice emerges. You have observed the phrases, traced their hidden patterns, and glimpsed the shadows that speak through words. The next step is not confrontation, not argument, and not judgment. It is observation, reflection, and deliberate attention. The awakening begins in the spaces between sound and meaning, in the subtle currents that guide thought and action. It is here, in the silent depths beneath speech, that transformation quietly unfolds. Begin by listening, not merely to respond, but to perceive. Let your awareness extend beyond the surface of words into the invisible architecture of intention. Hear the hesitations, the absolutes, the casual dismissals, the overconfident assertions. In each of these, a shadow moves. A pattern repeats, a hidden structure of thought is revealed. When you hear, "That's impossible," or "It doesn't matter," resist the urge to react with frustration or correction. Instead, observe what fear, what avoidance, what unseen limitation is shaping this declaration. By doing so, you turn observation into insight and insight into understanding. This practice is not external alone. The phrases that reveal limitation in others also exist within your own mind. Notice when you speak them, whether aloud or silently. Notice when fear masquerades as indifference, when avoidance hides behind casual dismissal, or when pride cloaks uncertainty. In these moments, pause internally, not to condemn yourself, but to see clearly. Awareness is itself the transformative act. By witnessing, you step out of unconscious repetition and into conscious choice. You begin to act with intention rather than reaction, with clarity rather than assumption. The mystical dimension of this awakening is subtle but profound. Words are more than sound. They are living structures that carry intention, emotion, and energy. Each phrase you hear, each sentence you utter, participates in shaping reality. By observing and choosing with awareness, you align yourself with the currents of clarity and understanding, rather than the currents of fear and limitation. The world begins to respond differently, not because it changes on its own, but because your perception has shifted. What once seemed chaotic now reveals patterns. What once felt overwhelming now contains hidden logic. Begin small. In conversation, in thought, in writing, practice noticing patterns without immediate judgment. Recognize the phrases that reveal limitation, both in yourself and in others. Reflect on the underlying structures: fear, ego, avoidance, pride, insecurity. Allow your awareness to illuminate them. In time, this practice will transform not only how you perceive others, but how you perceive yourself in the world. It cultivates a subtle power, a quiet mastery, the ability to navigate complexity with composure, to act with discernment, and to speak with clarity. This awakening is not dramatic. It is not loud. It does not require confrontation or proving oneself. It is quiet, subtle, and deeply personal. It is an inward alignment of perception, thought, and intention. Each act of awareness deepens your understanding of mind, of reality, and of the invisible currents that govern interaction and consciousness. By choosing to perceive rather than react, to observe rather than judge, you begin to inhabit a different space, one of insight, presence, and subtle influence. Ultimately, the call to awakening is an invitation to mastery. Mastery of perception, mastery of thought, mastery of the subtle forces that shape words and reality. It is the practice of turning observation into wisdom, noticing into understanding, and reflection into quiet power. The phrases that once frustrated or revealed limitation are now tools, signposts guiding you toward deeper awareness. They are reminders that the shadow exists everywhere, and that true understanding begins by perceiving it without fear, without resistance, and without judgment. Step into this practice. Let awareness become habitual. Let observation become second nature. Begin to listen as though each phrase is a key, each sentence a doorway into understanding the hidden forces that govern mind, intention, and life. In doing so, you do more than navigate words. You navigate consciousness itself. And in that navigation, you awaken to a dimension of reality that is subtle, profound, and infinitely rich. The invisible realm where perception shapes thought, thought shapes words, and words shape the world. And now, as we arrive at the final moment of this journey, notice the quiet spaces between words, the unspoken truths that live there, waiting to be recognized. The phrases that once revealed limitation, fear, or rigidity now take on a different weight. They are no longer merely markers of shallow thinking. They are mirrors reflecting the structures of consciousness itself, windows into the hidden architecture of mind. In the silence after speech, in the pause between declaration and understanding, the true revelation of human thought emerges, subtle, profound, and ineffably alive. Observe how these words, these phrases ripple outward. They shape perception, influence behavior, and silently condition both speaker and listener. And yet the deepest truths are not in what is spoken, they are in what remains unspoken. The unseen currents, the shadows lurking behind intention, and the quiet threads connecting thought to reality are where mastery resides. To perceive these invisible forces is to glimpse the mind itself in motion, to see how thought, Ego, fear, and awareness intertwine in patterns that define the very fabric of existence. Consider this. Each man you have encountered, each phrase that once irritated or confused you, contains within it the same patterns that exist within your own consciousness. Words that expose limitation are also invitations to self-reflection, to deeper awareness, to the practice of observing shadow without judgment. In witnessing the mind of another, you witness your own, and the subtle boundaries between self and other begin to dissolve. What you hear externally becomes a mirror internally, a reflection of what you might yet transform within yourself. And now, imagine the world through this lens. Conversations become living landscapes of intention and insight. Casual remarks reveal currents of fear, pride, and avoidance, but they also reveal potential, opportunity, and depth. You begin to navigate human interaction with the awareness of a traveler who reads maps invisible to most. You see the architecture of thought, the shadows that shape decisions, and the hidden patterns that govern perception. In doing so, you inhabit a space of quiet mastery where awareness itself becomes a source of subtle power and profound understanding. This is the ultimate mystery. The lines between speech, thought, and reality are thinner than we imagine. The phrases that expose ignorance are also the very keys to wisdom. The shadows that appear in others' words are shadows within your own mind, waiting to be perceived, understood, and integrated. In this cycle, observation, reflection, perception, the boundaries of understanding expand. Depth replaces superficiality. Insight replaces reaction. Presence replaces unconscious drift. And so, as the echoes of these words fade into silence, carry with you this awareness. The universe communicates constantly, often in whispers disguised as casual conversation, in phrases spoken carelessly, yet charged with unseen intention. To hear is not enough, you must perceive. To perceive is not enough, you must integrate. And in this integration, the hidden architecture of mind, consciousness, and reality reveals itself, softly, quietly, inevitably. The world is alive with these patterns. The subtle architecture of thought exists everywhere, in conversation, in reflection, in the interplay of shadow and awareness. To navigate it consciously is to awaken, to see beyond what is said, beyond what is visible, to the invisible structures shaping experience itself. And as you leave this awareness, carry the quiet knowledge that mastery is not loud, not forceful, not proclaimed. It is subtle. It is reflective. It is the ability to witness, understand, and move through the world with clarity that few possess and even fewer recognize. In the end, the phrases that once exposed limitation now illuminate the path. The mind, the shadow, the words, and the unspoken spaces between them all converge to reveal a truth both simple and profound. Perception shapes reality, thought shapes perception, and awareness is the bridge between what is seen and what is real. Walk this path with quiet attention, listen beyond the words, observe beyond the surface. And in doing so, you step into a dimension of consciousness where insight, depth, and the subtle magic of awareness are inseparable from life itself.